And fire safety is what we're talking about today, so why don't you fire away?
Yeah, 'tis the season for fire safety, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it's a good time to talk about that.
It's been extremely dry lately, and this is, a very vulnerable time of the year for people that are out that love to go out and drive through the woods or go to the mountain range to cool down. What they need to prepare for is at this time of the year when certain fire restrictions are in place, they need to have fire apparatus. They need to have at least a gallon of water or a 2.5-pound fire extinguisher and a shovel that's 28 inches long and 8 inches wide. That's required to be off-road in our county right now.
What's the 2.5-pound fire extinguisher, the little one?
Yes, it's a smaller fire extinguisher, and they consider that, I guess, just an opportunity to have some kind of prevention or help put out a small fire. Obviously, if somebody drives into an area and there's a big raging fire going, that's not going to work, but this would be for if they happen to stroll upon a smoldering campfire that somebody has left abandoned or has thought that they put out, or a small car fire to stop the fire from the engine. It's obviously not enough to stop a big fire, but it may be just enough to stop any fire that they should encounter as a person. And perhaps it even could be as much as them stopping on their own and lighting a cigarette and maybe some ashes fall into the ground and then start kind of a small fire. So it's an opportunity to put a small fire out before it gets big.
Yeah.
And the water's the same thing. It's just something to help, but they understand that we're not firemen and we don't have fire trucks, but they want us to kind of have something out there that we can at least try to help prevent a fire from spreading, I guess, because that small amount of fire extinguisher or the small shovel of small water, you're only going to do a certain amount.
So that's your job to have that, or is that what you recommend people who go up to the woods to have, or is that mandatory?
Right now it's mandatory. Yeah, my job as a forest patrol deputy is also, once we get into fire season, it's our job. It's just like safety protection for citizens, and awareness and education. It's our job to make sure that we educate them on all the potential hazards or dangers of being in the forest.
So what determines when it's mandatory? Because I don't know that I've ever gone up in the woods with a fire extinguisher.
The Department of Forestry or the U.S. State Forest Service normally dictates when the fire seasons change, and those fire seasons will change with the length of the heat or the lack of humidity in the air. So if we have a real long dry spell like we're having now, in the past few days we've had a lot of humidity. Prior to that we have had some dry spells, so the length and the amount of the heat and then the humidity in the air can dictate what type of fire season we're in. Generally, fire season in our county, as a rule of thumb, we start July 1st and it runs into October 1st. The fire season, the ODF can change the restrictions from 1 to 2 to 3. This also affects the loggers, and so they have to keep a real tight monitor on the weather, the humidity, and the wind conditions. Then they notify the logging operations at what level they're at. If they're at a level 1, then they're out of the woods at a certain time, and then they have a 1-hour fire watch after the end of their shift to make sure that none of the equipment that's been running all day catches on fire. If they go to level 2, then it's a 2-hour fire watch, and level 3, a 3-hour fire watch. If it gets much more extreme than that, then they'll actually just shut everything down. And that has happened. When we get to a level 3, this would even include you standing outside of your vehicle and not being able to smoke a cigarette. That's how dangerous the circumstances are with the heat and lack of humidity and wind. So it's really beneficial to people understand that if they want to go out in the woods and there's certain things they want to do when they go off road, that they should call the U.S. Forestry Service or ODF or Department of Forestry over in Forest Grove and say, what are the fire restrictions? Because if you are caught in the woods in a fire season and you don't have the shovel, the water, or the extinguisher, you can be subject to anywhere from, I think, about a $340 ticket up to $1,500, just depending on what type of activity you're involved in. But just simply driving through the woods, without that you can get a ticket, because you're required to carry that once you're off-road.
And if we didn't get all those letters that you had mentioned, abbreviations, can I call the Yamhill County Sheriff's Department and say, what do we need, what are the restrictions?
Yeah, you can call the
Dana?
Yamhill County Sheriff's Office, or you can call a local fire department or Department of Forestry. They should have those for you. If not, they'll definitely point you in the right direction, because there are some times that our office may not have that information provided to us at that time. And so if you want to be real cautious about what you're doing, then I would probably call the Department of Forestry or Fire Department.
Sure, okay. So that is kind of in line with your job and people who want to go out in the woods. How about just kind of everyday stuff? CERT is more for something that we deal with, can deal with an emergency from day to day. What are some commonalities between CERT and what you do?
Well, again, CERT, their job is to extinguish a small fire before it gets to be a big fire. Their job is to provide safety to their own members first, so that they can help others second. They also have a buddy system. So we're kind of the same way, by having the fire apparatus enough to stop a small fire before it gets big. Safety for the individuals that are in the woods, and so they do kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of similarities, and we find this even not in the fire portion of CERT and search and rescue, but everything else that goes along with it. And so the goal is to do the greatest for the good, for the greatest for the number. And so again, it's all about prevention, it's all about safety and awareness and education. We educate people out in the woods. We'll stop, hey, do you have your fire apparatus? Do you have this? Do you have that? CERT would do the same thing, but CERT also does and goes out to people's homes or their businesses or farms and can give them information saying, when fire season does come up, be prepared for this. You can prepare by keeping outside of your home, getting rid of the shrubs or low-hanging trees, tall grass. Inside the home, you can, there's non-compatible chemicals that will actually catch on fire just by setting beside themselves. So education is a big portion of that. They call it the octopus on your plug-ins. Yeah, when you have your power strips. A lot of people will plug one power strip into another power strip and another power strip. Well, you're just overloading everything, and you can go up and actually grab those cords, those extension cords, and they're warm. People will run, because of convenience, they'll run electrical cords under their carpet. And that's a big no-no, because what happens, once it's under that carpet, there are a certain amount of vibrations that your home has through all the power going through there and people walking around, and stepping on the carpet will eventually run through the rubber on the on the extension cord and cause a fire. So you kind of have to be real cautious in what you're doing inside the home and outside the home, and there's a lot of preventions. Sometimes it's just common sense. If you look at something and you think, well, gee, that doesn't seem to be right, then it probably isn't. And I think, if you watch Christmas Vacation, he's got all the extension cords on there, and the meter downtown's running crazy. But we do have a tendency to do that because it's the only convenient plug-in, and we don't have anything closer, so we just kind of keep stubbing off of other.
Yeah. How many lamps can you plug into a single outlet? If you have kind of the tree branch outlets.
Well, your traditional plug-in has 2 plug-ins, and then I believe your typical power strip has 5. And they don't have any more than that for a reason, because that's what it can handle. So, again,
how about 5 on each one? I'm trying to set up my computer, and it has, there's 5, and then there's the lamp, and then there's this thing and that thing, like throughout my one little room. I want to connect to that one outlet. Is that 5 on each one? Is that safe?
5 on each one would be safe, yeah.
Okay.
But or you're talking about running one plug-in off of that one onto another, or out of the wall?
Well, if there's 2 outlets,
Yep.
and as you said, there's 5 for a reason.
Right.
Can somebody, besides just myself, but can somebody plug in a 5 outlet on the top and then a 5
Correct.
outlet on the bottom?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
fine. It would be, what you're trying to avoid is, and it's still not ideal. I mean, it's still not ideal, but you're trying to avoid plugging into the other power strip and off of that power strip. I would still, if you could, find another power source and split it up if you're going to have that much, because that's an awful lot for one plug-in, whether it's plugged into the top or the bottom, or you piggyback off of another power strip, still coming from that one source. And so it's requiring the juice that's going to the outlet to produce a lot more, because you keep asking for more, and so that you're going to get more heat. And and that's the interesting about fire, is that we have the fire triangle. It requires 3 things in order for fire to burn. You have to have heat, fuel, and oxygen. And if you don't have all 3 of those, you won't have a fire. And so that's why the fuels in the home, chemicals in the pantry together that are not compatible fuels, or outside in the garage, gas and propane or paint and that kind of stuff mixed together. You want to stay away from that. And again, the shrubs, keep your shrubs away from the house if you can, or low-hanging tree limbs or tall grass are always an additional fire hazard and can cause a real problem.
It seems like every year where I live, I drive up the road and there's always a fire somewhere in the field.
Right.
How does that happen, and is there any way to prevent it?
Well, how that happens again is we have the fire triangle. We have to have a heat source, we have to have fuel, and we have to have oxygen. So we have a field now, right now, even a lot of people's yards, they can't keep up on the watering, that do get some watering a couple times a week, are turning brown. As that field it turns completely brown and it's dry because that sun's beating down on it every day, and it's been harvested, and you have the stubble or you have the tall grass, that's the fuel. And now you have the heat from the vehicle that's driving on there, so the exhaust, some people, if they don't take into consideration how hot that exhaust actually gets, now you're running that exhaust across that very dry grass or that very dry fuel. And even though that vehicle is moving, I think a lot of people haven't experienced the fact that if it's moving, they think, oh, we'll probably be okay. If it's when we stop that there's a problem, well, that stuff is dry enough that you'll see a lot of these farmers' fields that catch on fire is because somebody went out there in a low exhaust vehicle, and then you have the oxygen, and then you have a fire.